a little bit of trickery to actually get red dot sights onto them. Now, what are the benefits of the RPK-74M? Especially considering that we're using it naked, we're really going to have to get every little bit we can out of this gun to be competitive. Well, it's got a 40-round magazine, which is nice. That means you can take down multiple targets before you need to reload, gives you a little bit more reload freedom. However, it does have a very slow rate of fire, so you have to be absolutely as tactical as possible with this weapon to ensure that you start shooting at your opponent first. You're being sneaky beaky, you're going for those headshots, and you're being accurate. Luckily, the weapon has very low recoil, so if you're an accurate shot, chances are you can land most of your shots on target and hopefully drop your opponent before they drop you. It's a highly effective weapon at range, again because of that low recoil, but also because you got that ammo box, you have a large magazine, you can spam a lot of fire at those further ranges, which is something that you might not want to do with some of your less effective weapons. You want to conserve your ammo until you get in close quarters where they're more effective, but since you don't have that ammo problem with this class, you can spam fire all you want and get those extra kills at further ranges. It is something to consider when running the support class in general, and especially when you have a nice accurate LMG like the RPK. Now, if I were to modify this setup, I think I might just start off by putting an optic on there. I don't know how many attachments this weapon actually needs to be effective. It's got extremely low first shot recoil, which means you can tap fire this weapon. And if you start putting on other attachments there, you start to reduce the ability of this gun to tap fire, and that'll ultimately reduce your effectiveness at range, provided that you do like the tap firing technique. If you don't like the tap firing technique, you might be better suited with the RPK-12, which has a slightly larger magazine. It just has slightly higher first shot recoil, so that one works a little bit more effectively than this gun when just using in full auto and longer bursts. Now, you'll notice I'm running the defensive perk here. I really don't think there's a lot of other options for the support class, and defensive perk is so good for reducing that chest shot damage. It's just incredibly useful. If you can survive an extra round, it means you're gonna survive a lot of firefights that come down to the wire. You have as much ammo as you need, so you're not going to need any sort of perks that give you extra ammunition either. And especially with a long-range weapon, you're not going to need the speed as much. You can usually hang out in buildings or in covered areas and just shoot from afar. You don't have to push the objective as much with this class. In addition to that, if you are pushing the objective, you're going to start running into people with much higher rate of fire weapons that can out DPS you regardless of how good your aim is. So going up close and personal with this class is putting yourself at a disadvantage. Yeah, sure, if you're a really good player, you can probably do fairly well regardless of what gun you're running. It's just about advantages and disadvantages, and if you want to do better, you're going to play to your weapon's strengths. Now, as much as I love the 44 Magnum in this game, I didn't use it too much since I've got a 40-round magazine. It's a slow-firing weapon. I didn't run into too many situations where I had to quickly switch to a sidearm. The 44 Magnum is a lot of fun though, and especially getting those headshots in close quarters, just one-shotting people down is always fun and entertaining. Now, does the AK platform make a lot of sense in the world of Walking Dead? Well, in terms of reliability, absolutely. The AK-47, the RPK, any sort of AK-style gun, it's going to be extremely reliable because of the system design. It's a fairly clean running system overall, and even if you do get a lot of dirt in the gun, it's really not going to affect the performance too bad. I mean, the AK is notorious for being one of the most reliable platforms in the world, which is great in a post-apocalyptic environment where you don't have a lot of time to sit down and meticulously clean your weapon, or perhaps you get stuck in just bad situations where it's raining and muddy and grimy, and again, you're on the run, don't have time to clean up to get your gun operating and functioning as best as possible. The AK is perfect for that scenario. The downside, of course, is finding ammunition for the weapon. If you're scrounging ammo from the US military or police stations, chances are they're going to have 5.56 and 2.23 style rounds, which will not work in your AK. And unless you just stumble across somebody who's an AK aficionado and has a lot of ammunition for it, you're probably not going to find it in too many places other than gun shops. And even then, you're probably going to find still a lot more 2.23, 5.56 style ammunition around. So in terms of just the availability of ammo, the AK doesn't make a huge amount of sense. That being said, I still totally think it's awesome that Rick runs with an AK, and sure, maybe he did find an awesome stash of ammo and he's going to use his AK until he runs out of it. Otherwise, that pretty much wraps it up for this episode of Loadout. If you're watching Walking Dead, enjoy the finale, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.
actions. They speak louder. We like that. Not just because
Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today is Monday, which means it's time for an episode of Loadout, the series where you guys, the viewers, get to pick a gun and customization for me to use in Battlefield 4. The way you do this is you leave a comment down below letting me know what kind of weapon and accessories you'd like me to run with, and I will pick one of the top rated comments for the next episode. Today's top comment comes from Jack Carlson. He says, the United States Air Force Joint Terminal Attack Controller, JTAC. Kit is going to be the Recon. Soldier camouflage will be UCP. Upgrade path will be defensive. Our primary weapon today will be the classic M4 with an ACOG 4x optic, laser light combo, a vertical grip, and a flash hider. The secondary will be the M9 pistol with iron sights, no accessories, and a standard barrel, basically a naked M9. Then for Gadget 1, I'll be using the Soap Flam. For Gadget 2, I'll be using the Radio Beacon. We'll have a hand flare instead of grenades and the bayonet knife. And then he says, Level Cap, you are a United States Air Force Joint Terminal Attack Controller, and using this loadout, play on US faction on large open vehicle centric maps, and try to play more of a supportive role by laser designating targets and spotting vehicles, etc. Don't be afraid to engage in any infantry combat though. In real life, United States Air Force JTACs deploy with the Marine Corps and Army units and call in airstrikes on enemy positions, and I try to replicate this as much as possible. Take it easy. So here we are on a large map. I didn't play Conquest Large the whole time. I tried a little bit of Rush, a little bit of Team Deathmatch just to get some interesting action in there. His Conquest Large was kind of sporadic gameplay for the most part. I did do a lot of laser designating, but not a lot of coordinating with the team, or at least not a lot of people with rocket launchers suitable to take advantage of my SOFLAM. Now the M4 with an ACOG sight is probably a very, very common military setup. The M16 and M4 with this are ideal for medium to long range combat or standard infantry combat. The combat ranges that you experience in Battlefield are a lot closer quarter than what you would probably expect to see in a general war scenario. So you're going to want something like a 4x scope for that, because you're not really going to be shooting at people that are that close to you for the most part. Now, if you're moving quickly and clearing buildings, then red dot sights, without question, are very, very useful. It is interesting to kind of try and incorporate an ACOG to close quarter or medium range gameplay a little bit more. The problem with the M4 in this game is that it's burst fire, and this was something that I talked about a lot when Battlefield 4 just came out, because the M4 in Battlefield 3 had a full auto function, and it was a very, very good carbine along with the M16. And then when we moved to Battlefield 4, basically we only had burst fire as an option for those two weapons, which was definitely a good way to make people stop using those guns or make them less popular. And it kind of sucks because the M4 is such an iconic weapon, such a commonly used weapon, and something that is so heavily associated with America's military, yet it's just a weapon that I wouldn't ever really consider using in this game seriously, because burst fire is so difficult to use, or at least difficult to be really effective with. Now, if I do decide to use a burst fire weapon, I have to have the ultimate attachments for it to be enjoyable. Let's take a look at the attachments that we're using here and see if they make any sense when using them with the M4 in this game. In real life, it's an entirely different story, but in the game, let's see what we're working with here. Well, we've got the flash hider for the barrel attachment, which is something I pretty much wouldn't recommend for any gun in this game. The flash hider, all it does is make it so that your spread decreases slower, so that if you are burst firing a weapon or tap firing a weapon, it's going to become inaccurate and stay inaccurate for a longer period of time, which means the longer you shoot this gun, the less accurate it's going to be, rendering the ACOG sight somewhat useless if you're trying to put a lot of fire down range. Then we have the vertical grip, which further compounds that problem. All the attachments in this game seem to have some sort of negative side effect, and if you compound one negative side effect with another attachment that compounds that same one further, you could run into some real accuracy problems. So we've created a gun here that's going to get inaccurate very fast and start missing a lot of shots. So it virtually is pointless to have the ACOG sight on here, and I found myself just missing a lot of stationary targets at further ranges. Even when I lined up the ACOG scope perfectly, shots just wouldn't connect, and that's because of the attachments that we're using. Now, the one benefit of the vertical grip is that it does give you more accurate hipfire accuracy, and since we're using the laser light combo, if I leave it on the laser sight there, I can hipfire this weapon in close quarters. So I guess there's some sort of benefit there, although it's not really a weapon that I'm generally going to want to take into close quarter combat for the most part. So although this gun has a lot of attachments on it that would make a lot of sense in real life and that we would expect to see a soldier running with in real life, they don't really complement each other in game very well, and that's unfortunate, and I hope it's something that gets remedied in future Battlefield games. I think there's better ways to do the attachment systems rather than creating systems where people can create guns that are flat out worse than they would if they didn't have any attachments on them to begin with. And that's just an aspect of Battlefield that I think makes it really hard for novice players. People who don't understand the attachment system that well can actually end up hurting their gameplay more than they realize, and they may never really understand why their guns aren't performing as well. They might just think it's their own personal skill at the game, but you can actually have a gun that just sucks in this game, and it's going to lower your KDR and your effectiveness on the battlefield. Now, because we have flares instead of grenades, I chose to play a bit on Rush, because that game mode is more choke pointy, and when you use flares on Rush, you can counteract people using those IRNV optics fairly well, and those are very popular in this game still, just because it makes it so easy to spot out your bad guys. So if you're throwing down those flares, you can counteract the thermal optics from tanks, you can counteract the thermal optics from soldiers, and if you know they have to push up one alley or another, throwing down flares there will completely invalidate their optics. I mean, it's a risky business, and I wouldn't rely on it solely to try and keep you alive, but it certainly can help. Now, sadly, I wasn't able to replicate too many JTAC operations. I did try and SOFLAM as much as possible, but for the most part, it just kind of got to vehicles to deploy their countermeasures prematurely. Unfortunately, I feel like this loadout here just isn't the best translation from real-world loadout into video game loadout. It certainly isn't the most effective. Perhaps if you had a much more coordinated team and coordinated squad that knew you're going to be SOFLAMing all the time, it could be a little bit more effective, but ultimately it's not that big a deal. At the end of the day, the only thing this loadout really has going for it is the aesthetics, which granted are pretty cool. That pretty much wraps it up for this week's episode of Loadout. Don't forget to leave your comment for next week's episode, and as always guys, I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing. Hey guys, Level Cap here, and today seems like a good day to talk about the future of Battlefield 4, as it was recently announced that it doesn't look like there's any more DLC coming to BF4. The support for the game has probably ended, and now we're moving on to Battlefield 5, whatever that may be. I have a feeling we're going to hear about it in the very near future. E3 is coming up in June, and if the game is not announced by then at the very latest, I will be very surprised. I imagine we'll be hearing about it earlier than that, so sometime within the next 3 months. Now, Battlefield 4 has been one hell of a title for DICE. I mean, it started off with a pretty rocky launch and didn't get better till quite a few months down the road. Patch after patch, improving the game, refining the game. It started off with some extremely bad netcode that was very hard to play on, and has ended up with some of the best multiplayer netcode I've seen in any first-person shooter. Now, as we've seen over the years, each Battlefield title tries to improve upon the last one in one way or another, whether it's improved graphics,